car right there," my mother-in-law shrieked as I backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I watched Diane sprint after my own Porsche in her good church heels, one arm flung out like she thought she could physically stop 2 tons of German steel with her bare hand. In the back seat, my 3-year-old son, Milo, sat perfectly still, hugging the stuffed dinosaur he takes everywhere, watching his grandmother chase the car like it belonged to someone else entirely. Because that's exactly what Diane believed. She believed that Porsche was her son's. She believed the house behind her, the one my name alone sat on the deed for, belonged to him too. By the next morning, both of those beliefs would be in pieces. And so would something in my marriage I'd spent 6 years pretending wasn't already broken. Welcome back to Hidden Truth Stories. This is the channel for the quiet moments that split a whole life in two. If a story like this has ever felt uncomfortably familiar, drop a comment and let me know you're watching. And before we go further, where are you tuning in from tonight? Type your city below. I read every single one. My name is Elise Carter. I'm 36. 2 hours before that scene in the driveway, our backyard in Charlotte had been full of relatives celebrating my father-in-law, Walter's retirement. I'd spent 3 full days getting that party ready around my actual job, managing supply logistics for a hospital network, because that's what I do. I plan things until they're airtight. Then I show up and make sure they run. At first, Diane's comments were small enough to swallow. She told a cousin my job kept me too busy to really be present. When I carried out a tray of deviled eggs, she looked at my dress and asked loudly whether Ryan had picked it out for me. A few people near her went quiet and looked at their plates. Nobody said a word. My husband, Ryan, stood at the grill the entire time, flipping burgers he didn't need to flip, doing what I now understand was his signature move, staying exactly busy enough that he never had to choose a side. I'd been married to him 6 years. I knew that posture. It meant, please, just let this one go, like you always do. And for 6 years I had, because somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself swallowing things was the same as keeping the peace. I was wrong about that for a very long time. Then Diane crouched beside Milo and smoothed his hair back. "One day," she said, loud enough that half the party turned, "you're going to understand that your daddy is the one who gave your mommy everything she has." I set my drink down. "Diane, please don't say things like that to my son." The yard went still. Even Milo looked between us. Diane rose slowly, hand pressed to her chest. "After everything this family has done for you, you're going to embarrass me at Walter's own retirement party? I asked you not to say something untrue in front of my child," I said. "That's all." That's when Ryan finally left the grill. Not to stand beside me, to stand beside her. "Elise," he said in the voice he uses on difficult clients, "apologize to my mother." I looked at him for a long moment. His jaw was tight, his eyes flicking toward the 30 relatives now watching us. "Either you apologize to my mother," he said, quiet enough that only I could hear, "or you can pack a bag and figure out where you're staying tonight." Milo was close enough to hear every word of that sentence. That decided everything. Not the years of small comments. The fact that my husband had just given me an ultimatum in front of our son. "Fine," I said. "I'll go." I carried Milo through the house, grabbed his overnight bag, and walked out the front door. Ryan followed us as far as the porch and didn't try to stop us. That silence told me more than anything he'd said all afternoon. That's when Diane ran after the car, screaming for me to leave it, as though 6 years of marriage had transferred the title of a vehicle I'd bought with my own inheritance into her son's name by sheer force of belief. I drove 12 minutes to a hotel near Milo's daycare. Once he was settled, I texted Ryan our exact location and offered a video call so he could say goodnight. Whatever was happening between us, I was never going to make our son a weapon. He didn't respond. At 9 the next morning, my attorney, Nadia Brooks, called my husband. For the first time in 6 years, Ryan was about to hear the truth about our finances, laid out by someone with no reason to protect his pride. If you've ever swallowed something small at a family gathering because you didn't want to make a scene, tell me in the comments. What was the moment you finally stopped swallowing it? Nadia called me 20 minutes after she hung up with Ryan. "He's rattled," she said. But he listened. That matters more than you'd think. She told him I had retained counsel regarding a temporary separation, the preservation of our shared finances, and a written custody schedule for Milo. She also told him the house and the Porsche couldn't be sold, refinanced, or transferred while ownership records were formally reviewed. A review that wasn't going to take long because the records had never actually been complicated. My grandmother Louise raised me for most of my teenage years. Her house wasn't a mansion, a solid 4-bedroom, mortgage-free, that she left me when she passed. I was 24. She also left me a small commercial lot I sold 3 years later. I used part of that money to buy the Porsche and put the rest toward our Charlotte house 6 months before I married Ryan. Both purchases happened before the wedding. The deed and title were in my name alone, on my estate attorney's advice, and I never once used our shared money on either one. Ryan moved in after our wedding. At first, his family's confusion about who owned what seemed harmless. Diane once praised Ryan for providing such a beautiful home, and he just smiled and let it sit there. When I asked him privately why he hadn't corrected her, he shrugged. "She's proud of me. Why embarrass her over paperwork?" I should have insisted on the truth right then. What I didn't understand yet was that Ryan wasn't protecting his mother from embarrassment. He was quietly building an entire version of himself out of things that had never belonged to him. During Nadia's call, Ryan protested that I couldn't just take his son and everything he owned. Her answer was calm. "Elise hasn't taken Milo out of the county. As for the property, I'd suggest you read the deed and title before calling either one yours." She proposed temporary terms letting him stay in the house, made clear he couldn't invite anyone else to move in, and said every point would follow in writing. Less than a minute later, Ryan called. "What exactly did you tell your lawyer?" he demanded. "I told her the truth," I said. "Now I want you to try that too. You're turning one bad afternoon into a legal war." "No. Your mother humiliated me in front of our son, and you told me to apologize or leave my own house." I asked the question that had followed me since the backyard. Why does your mother think she has the right to scream at me over a car I paid for myself? At first he blamed Diane entirely. That didn't explain why she genuinely believed the Porsche was his. "Ryan, what did you actually tell them?" His answer came in pieces. Diane had spent years comparing him to his older brother Grant, a partner at a Raleigh law firm with a lake house. Tired of hearing about it, Ryan told her he'd bought our house right before the wedding, and that my name was on the deed only for tax reasons. Later, he told the family the Porsche had been his anniversary gift to me. I sat on the hotel bed, understanding fully, for the first time, that this was never a misunderstanding I'd failed to correct. My husband had spent 6 years using my inheritance to build a version of himself his family would admire, and letting them treat me like a dependent was the price of making that story believable. "There's more," he admitted. Months earlier, Walter and Diane had talked about selling their place after retirement, and Ryan had told them, without asking me, they could move into our guest suite. "You offered my in-laws a room in my house without asking me." "I figured you'd come around. They're my parents." He apologized in the loose, unfocused way people do when they still don't understand what they're apologizing for. Then he asked if I could just apologize to Diane so everyone could calm down. "You still think the problem is that your mother's feelings got hurt," I said, and hung up. "Second question for you. If you found out your spouse had spent years letting their family believe your things were theirs, what would you need to hear from them before you'd even consider staying?" I asked Nadia to help me quietly review our joint accounts. That afternoon, 14 months of statements arrived. Near the bottom were repeated transfers to Walter and Diane, over $11,000 total, sent quietly, $300 here, $600 there, labeled roof repair, car payment, once simply Mom. Ryan had pulled it all from our joint savings, meant for emergencies for Milo's future. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. My parents were struggling. Dad's retirement got delayed, and the roof started leaking. "You could have asked me." "I knew what you'd say." That sentence landed harder than almost anything else. He hadn't forgotten to mention it. He'd decided my answer didn't matter enough to ask for. Nadia helped me slow down before anger made every decision. Instead of draining the account immediately, I redirected my future paychecks into a new account, downloaded every statement, turned on transaction alerts, and let her handle the rest properly. We also sent Ryan a proposed temporary parenting schedule, regular time with Milo, nothing punitive. 2 days later, Ryan rented a furnished apartment and returned his house key voluntarily. Watching him carry boxes out was painful, even knowing it was a consequence he'd built himself. Diane reacted differently, calling relatives to say I was using lawyers to destroy her son. I wanted to post the deed, the title, every transfer where the whole family could see it. But public humiliation was what had gotten us here, and I refused to pick up the same weapon and call it justice. Walter was the first to question the story. He called that evening, sounding older than at his own party. "Elise, Diane says the house is Ryan's? Ryan says it isn't. And now I'm hearing the money he gave us came from your joint account. I think this family needs to hear the truth from him." I agreed to one meeting with one condition. I'm not going to expose Ryan for him. He tells you himself. The meeting happened in a family counselor's plain office. 4 chairs, a box of tissues, no photographs on the walls. Diane arrived accusing me of keeping Milo from Ryan and using legal tricks to seize property. I have never denied Ryan his scheduled time, I said, and I haven't seized anything. The deed, the title, and the bank statement sat on the table in front of me, unopened. This truth belonged to Ryan to tell? Walter looked at his son. "You asked us here. Talk." Ryan's hands stayed clasped between his knees. Then he admitted I'd inherited the house years before we married, bought the Porsche with my grandmother's money, and there had never been a mortgage for him to pay. He admitted telling everyone he'd bought the house, claiming the Porsche as my gift, and offering his parents the guest suite without asking me. Diane turned to her son. You let me say those things to her, while you knew every word of it wasn't true. Yes. Why? Because correcting you would have exposed me. If this story is hitting close to home, subscribe so the next one finds you, and tell me, would you have kept a truth like that, hidden the way Ryan did, or corrected it the very first time? Diane finally looked at the papers. I slid the deed and title across the table. She read my name printed on both, set them down, and said nothing at all. I had imagined that exact moment during sleepless nights, expecting triumph. Sitting there, all I felt was tired. I'm not here to take Ryan's house away. It was never his. I'm here because my son watched his father tell his grandmother that humiliating me had no consequences. Diane's eyes filled, but her first apology still protected her pride. I'm sorry if you felt disrespected. I didn't feel disrespected. You disrespected me on purpose, and my son heard every word. An apology starts with naming what you did, not questioning how I took it. The counselor asked what I wanted. I said the lies corrected, the money accounted for, and every adult in that room, understanding Milo, would never carry messages between us. Ryan looked at me with a fragile hope. Now that it's all out, can we go home and work this out? No, I said. Knowing the truth doesn't undo what happened. The separation stands. I cried at a red light on the way back, where nobody could see me. I hadn't wanted to defeat Ryan. I'd wanted him to stand beside me the moment his family humiliated me, and instead I got a confession, 2 weeks and 1 intervention too late. 2 days later, he sent a written message to every relative at that party, stating plainly that I had owned the house and Porsche before we married, that I had contributed enormously to our family, and that he had lied for years out of feeling smaller than his brother. He signed a repayment plan for the $11,000 and started individual counseling. A week later, Milo and I moved back into the house. That evening, tucking him in, he asked, "Did Daddy leave because Grandma said Mommy was bad?" "No," I told him. "Daddy left because the grown-ups needed time to make better choices. You didn't do anything wrong, and Mommy and Daddy both love you." The following Saturday, Diane's car pulled into the driveway uninvited. "I need to see my grandson," she said. "This has gone on long enough." Ryan stepped between his mother and the doorway himself. "Mom, you don't walk into Elise's home uninvited. Not anymore." "You're choosing her again," Diane said. "No," he said quietly. "I'm finally taking responsibility for what I helped you do to her." That night, Diane left me a 4-minute voicemail. For the first time in 6 years, her apology didn't start with the word if. "I humiliated you in front of Milo. I screamed at you over a car that was never his. I was wrong. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just needed to say that clearly, without an excuse attached. So tell me honestly, if the in-law who humiliated you finally apologized without any excuses attached, would that be enough for you?" Subscribe if you want to hear how this one keeps going, and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I still don't know what my marriage looks like a year from now, but the deed still has one name on it, the Porsche still has one name on it, and for the first time in 6 years, so does the truth.